Yo, what's up? It's your boy Elephante, and I'm hanging out with my dude Rob on Front Row Live.
This tour that you just kicked off for Diamond Days, like nobody does a tour for a single. Like this is a single that you're kind of promoting as like the Diamond Days tour. What is the idea behind that?
Well, the song's like, I think it's a big shift in sort of my musical perspective and the kind of music that I want to make.
Yeah.
I grew up as a singer-songwriter and was in bands and stuff, and then I fell in love with dance music, with EDM, and started doing the DJ thing, and like I love doing that. But as I've gotten older and been doing this longer, I've been like, what's really exciting to me? And I sort of was like looking back at my past, like the Diamond Days, and like what was really exciting to me about music back then. And it was a lot of the alt rock and like performing and singing. And so Diamond Days was like sort of the song that kind of crystallized that idea for me. And then so on the live side, we also wanted to try to do something new, and so we've been I've been working on developing this live show where it's sort of a hybrid of sort of the DJ stuff that I've been doing for the last few years, and then also incorporating a lot of the guitar and live singing and sort of production stuff that has and just trying to create like this sort of new thing that no one's really done before. And so we wanted to bring the show out and do something. It felt like a whole new idea that I wanted to explore, and we were talking a little bit about this before, but it's like figuring out all the live stuff has been like fucking insane. So it's been
like crazy, but it's cool though because you come from the live, like being in live bands. So it's like the Skrillex kind of like way, because it's like he came from that like punk rock world, and then now he's pursuing the electronic music. So like, what made you want to transition from being in that rock world, band world, to now being an electronic artist?
It was honestly just kind of a twist of fate. I was doing like the acoustic singer-songwriter thing. I was in LA playing open mics, and let me tell you, that shit is fucking miserable. Once you do that, like having a bad DJ show is like, that's fine. But no, it was I heard, speaking of Skrillex, I heard Scary Monsters, and my head exploded. I was like, what is this? Because it had all the sort of, it had the shape and sort of the motion of a lot of the music I love, but it also had these absolutely insane mind-bending sounds I'd never heard before, and was like, what is this? How does one make this, and why does it still work, even though it's like, they're not notes, right? It's just like, and so I downloaded Ableton and just started messing around, and one thing led to another, and it just sort of opened the box for all the different things you could do in music. It was, because I had been doing guitar and singing, and the analogy I use is it's like I'd been drawing in pencil my whole life, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you can paint now too, and it's like now you have all these colors, and it's like, and so I just started doing that for fun, and it really was just like this is dope, and I don't know what it really means for my life, or like, but like I'm really excited about it, and just kind of fell in love with it and the culture, and one thing led to another, and then that stuff started really taking off, and leaned into that.
And it seems like you kind of started doing this when electronic music was not as mainstream as it is today. I feel like now there's so many new electronic artists, but you've been basically paying your dues like in this genre. What have been some of the challenges that you faced in order to kind of make a name for yourself in this world?
I mean, it really is a grind, and I think the big thing for me early on, and I think a lot of young artists now go through it, is that you always see the one hit, and you are like, oh, all I need is one hit, or like all I need is the one song, and boom, you're Avicii or you're Skrillex or whatever. But then what you don't realize is like all the steps that it takes before you get to that one hit. And a lot of it was creative, where it was like I wanted to make something in my head, but I wasn't good enough. I didn't know how to do it yet. So like that was a challenge. Like that took years and years and years of just like listening to the same kick drum over and over again until you like kind of start to get a hang of it. And so, there's the creative side, but then also just on the business, it's a cold world out there.
Oh, yeah. I feel like more so now.
Yeah, man. Like it's, the people that are successful, they want to keep their success. There are people that are just coming out that are hungry, and honestly, it's like no one cares, and that's probably the biggest emotional hurdle, where it's like, you know, you try to make music that you care about and means something to you, and you put every ounce of your soul into something, and then you put it out, and no one gives a shit.
Right.
And then you got to pick yourself up and do that again, and then you do that over and over again for years until like a couple people start caring, and so it's just, you know, I've been independent my entire career, so like no one in the industry is necessarily looking out for you. And in a lot of cases, they're like actively trying to bring you down because, you know, you're not paying your cut to them. You're not, you know, paying the gatekeepers. And so it's just, you know, both creatively and sort of on the business side, it's just like, you just, you know, it's a long grind.
But I feel like at the same time, like with your collaborations, with your features that you have, like it's kind of made you purposely choose these artists that nobody else has heard of. Like all those vocals, all those voices I hear in your songs, like they're all new artists to me, with the exception of one of my favorite tracks, Troubled. And you called out to my boys in Brooklyn and had them do a remix. I not necessarily grew up with him, but when he was doing the band scene, Cameron, I would always be filming Alaska and doing all that stuff with Alaska. Oh, so like, it's cool to see new artists kind of helping other new artists out at the same time. But like, talk to me about Brooklyn, for example, and like what made you specifically choose them for this remix of Troubled?
I think I had heard them on Spotify or something. They'd come up somehow, and I think it was maybe some of their stuff on Enhanced. I can't remember, but like I'd heard of them and I'd seen their names, and like I loved their sound, and it was one of those things where I love Troubled, and it was a very sort of different sound for me at the time, but I did want sort of more of that dancey kind of upbeat thing, and I just thought that they'd be perfect for it. And I think we knew their manager at the time, or my manager knew their manager, and so when we're, you know, brainstorming ideas on who to tap to do remixes, like they're like at the top of the list, and luckily we had to connect to them, and it was, you know, that's one of the few times where sort of the stars align when like things actually work out the way you want, because that doesn't happen very often.
Right. So back to Diamond Days. Is this a one-off single? You mentioned earlier it's a new sound or style of yours, but like, is this a one-off single, or is this coming to be like what we can see as like the sophomore album or like another EP?
It is a part of a larger project.
Okay.
It is the beginning of sort of the next chapter of all the Elephante stuff. It's coming together. It's going to be a new album, and I think it's sort of, I have a ton of songs that are like half done, and a couple that are like pretty much done. I'm playing a bunch of new stuff tonight, but it just felt like the sort of center of gravity of all the new stuff, creatively, visually, sonically, lyrically, that I felt excited by. And so it was the one where, like, you know, it's sort of like my flag in the ground. It's like, this is where I'm going. This is the sound that I want. And, you know, we're gonna build the live show around it. We're gonna build the album around it. Right. And so it's sort of it's a sign of things to come. And, you know, I would have loved to have an album out already, but, you know, they get done when they get done. Yeah, so
you can't put a time on that.
Yeah, and you know, it's you just gotta kind of, some days you just get in the studio and you do your best, and then at the end of the day you're like, this sucks, and you fucking delete all of it. And then other days you like, it just happens magically, and it all comes together. And so it's sort of the sort of launching pad for me, and where I want to push off from for all the new music.
Now, do you feel like this new chapter was like basically a natural progression to this new music, or do you feel like you've just been, in a sense, kind of doing your artist development, trying to figure out who you are as an artist, like what kind of music you want to kind of like present to your audience?
Yeah, I think it's always a development, and you're always evolving. For me, a big part of it is that anything I make, I have to have this sense of I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. Because as soon as you're like, this has happened every single time where I'm like, oh, I know, like, I know like it's gonna sound like this.
Right.
Then you just start filling in the blanks, and then it doesn't have that sort of spark to it, and it doesn't feel. It's not like.
It wasn't the original idea.
Yeah, and it feels kind of lifeless, and so for me, it was I'm starting to get a hang of this electronic production thing.
Yeah.
What do I not know how to do? And like, oh, how do I like incorporate all this live stuff into it? How do I, I got a bunch of analog synths and was like playing around with like knobs I didn't understand. Like, I don't know what any of this does, but it just like, it adds that element of like, you're like a little kid again, where it's like, I remember when I got my first guitar and I was like, I don't know how to play any chords, but this is awesome. And like, it's always just trying to tap into that feeling of exploration and creating something new. And I think that's when the best stuff comes out.
Right. Now, right now we mentioned you're just kicked off the Diamond Days tour. And what's different this time around on the tour, aside from like you're playing live, you're using the guitar on stage, but what else can fans expect?
We have a insane amount of new visual production. We have a brand new stage, and it looks insane. And I've been working really closely with my visual creative director, and we've been incorporating like a bunch of crazy like live camera feed stuff. Nice. He's like a wizard. Like, I don't understand what he does, but if you come to the show, you'll see like just sort of we want to do things that you wouldn't see at a normal rave or a normal rock show, right? We want to kind of bring those two worlds together and bring up the best of both worlds. And I'm doing a lot of live singing, playing the guitar. We have like a lot of like visual storytelling, and so it's just like I think it's just a completely new experience for people.
To close us off, like, what is it about music? Like, you've changed directions a few times in your sound and your style and the kind of genres that you kind of were in. So what is it about music that keeps you, still dedicated to it?
I don't know, man. It's just magic. There's something, I think, from when I was a little kid. It was just the one thing that was always, and it made me feel alive in a way that nothing else could. I liked watching movies, I liked reading books, but it was always like, my darkest moments, my happiest times. It was the songs, it was the music that really made life worth living for me. And so there's something about it where maybe it's the way I'm wired, or I guess when I was a kid, my mom, when I was a baby and I would be crying, she would just put on Fantasia and like park me in front of the TV. So I don't know. I watched it when I was an adult, and I had like a bunch of really weird like latent flashbacks and shit. But it was I think that probably has something to do with it.
Have that playing on your live show as well.
I know, dude. I was like, it was a lot. I was like, I felt like I was like having a trip, even though I was totally sober. And I was like, this is so.
Well, dude, thanks for hanging out with me. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for the music and what's to come. You guys be sure to check out Elephante if you haven't already. And thanks for watching on Front Row Live.